Hello, everyone. Welcome to Rainbow Inspirations. I'm Greg Howell. I'm a volunteer with the Mountain Region of AARP North Carolina. And Rainbow Inspirations is a joint project with AARP North Carolina and Blue Ridge Pride. Today, we're happy to welcome as our special guest Dr. Jeffrey Walker. Uh, Jeff is a physician in the palliative care and hospice caregiving realm, and has been a resident of Western North Carolina along with his husband John for the last 12 years or so. And Jeff and I became through volunteer work together at a local food pantry. So, welcome, Jeff. We're glad to have you with us today.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
We hope that you will give us a little bit of your background. Let us get to know you a little bit better. Where are you from originally?
Sure. So I'm originally from the Midwest, northern Indiana, city named Fort Wayne, a couple hours north of Indianapolis, and grew up. Spent most of my life there until I moved a couple of years in Indianapolis, and then eventually to Western North Carolina here.
So you went to school in Fort Wayne, elementary, high school. Um, what was that like for you? I mean, obviously we've spoken before, and I know that you were not real clear about your identity at certain points in your young life.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, childhood was fine. Elementary school, uh, everything before high school was just kind of pretty normal school environment. My parents worked very hard to send us to private schools. They were working class. My dad worked initially in a piston factory, and mom stayed home and worked raising four kids and intermittently would work various places when my dad would be laid off. She actually worked at a grocery store in the checkout, at a McDonald's, and they did what they needed to get by to raise their family. But despite limited financial resources, they felt it was very important to send us to private schools for a good education. Um, and so I went to Lutheran schools. And for those viewing, you may or may not know there's several different types of the Lutheran faith, and the schools were run by the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. So anything I say about challenges, I don't want to equate to all Lutheran faiths because ELCA is certainly a very different situation than Missouri Synod. Missouri Synod was very common in northern Indiana, and so elementary school, it was just like any other school environment. We weren't really thinking about any kind of gay, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, any issues. We were just kids. I guess I probably all along knew I was a little bit different, but hadn't really thought a lot about those issues. But then high school was a challenge. It was I when I kind of reflected upon this, getting ready for the interview, I realized a good word to describe it was hell. It was a very lesbian, gay, actually the other letters in the acronym were not present then, but it was a religious high school. Every morning over the PA system, there would be prayers, and it was just not uncommon to hear prayers condemning gay people. That was typically the word they used. And I was in classes where they literally would take a survey. This was a religion class about whether or not you would be willing to sit next to someone with AIDS, because this was the time of Ryan White and a lot of the controversy about could he go to school or not, and that was further south in Indiana, but still a national topic. And my high school would preach that AIDS was a punishment for being gay, and so it was a very hard time. I can remember, you know, as I have a job now where I have an hour commute each direction, and so over the past three years with this job, I've had a lot of time to reflect on personal things even before preparing for this interview. And over the past few years, I've found myself processing some things I went through in high school, and one event in particular. I was a freshman and was in a biology class, and I hadn't accepted that I was gay. I really hadn't thought about it. But other people, other students perceived I was. And I there was one incident where a student came up in front of the entire class. I was in front or first or second row, and literally shoved my head into his groin area and simulated oral sex. I mean, I hate to be graphic, but this was in front of all these other students, and the teacher was right there in the classroom, not teaching. It was before class started. The teacher did nothing about it, and it was just today that would probably be viewed as a degree of at least sexual harassment, if not assault. And I as I think about those things, I realize it's contributed to maybe how I interact with people in authority, and certainly some experiences I've had in relation to churches and such. And so it was a hard time. Uh,
Were you getting any support from your parents, or were they aware of what was happening to you?
I don't know that my parents knew I was gay. I mean, I hadn't admitted it myself. In high school, I certainly started uh, thinking about things more, but it was so condemned by the church that I belonged to, that my family belonged to, and by the high school that I guess my mind couldn't even consider it. So it was in the background that I wasn't the same as other kids, but I hadn't accepted it, so they didn't have an opportunity to support me really. I didn't really come out until college, um, which I'm sure we'll get to in the questions. But I didn't, I came, my parents were unconditionally loving, as were my siblings and extended family. So I wasn't worried if I had been at the point of accepting it for myself. I certainly would have talked with them about it. I couldn't imagine they would have rejected me, but it just wasn't something I could even fathom.
Yeah. You mentioned college. So after you graduated from high school, where did you go to college?
So I went to Manchester College, which is a small liberal arts school. It's called Manchester University now, but it's maybe 45 minutes, an hour outside of Fort Wayne. And it was a place, when I looked at different schools, it was close enough to home that I could go back if I needed to, but far enough away, I felt like I could get the actual, the true college experience. And it was an amazing place. It was one of the few sections of 4 years of my life that I would do over again. There's really probably not many other stretches like that I would want to do again. It was, as I said, a liberal arts college. Interestingly, right across the hall from me in my dorm freshman year was a guy who was out. I mean, he was gay and didn't have any qualms about making that known. And so from the start at Manchester, I saw something that I hadn't seen anywhere else. There were no role models that I found in high school. And so Manchester I went there with the mindset of pre-medicine studying. I was very career focused back in high school. That's how I coped, was just deciding my life was going to be about being a doctor. It was going to be about being the best person I could be career wise. And I guess without necessarily admitting it, I had decided I wasn't going to have a personal life. But in college, I went there with the plans of academics, and I did great academically. But it was a community where I was encouraged to grow as a person, and encouraged to ask questions and speak out. It was just a phenomenal environment.
So you became more in touch with your personal identity during the years at Manchester. Was there a big turning point?
There was. So I think it was probably my junior year. We had January terms where we could take a month and do something that wasn't something that required a full semester. And I took I guess it would be described as a sociology class through an organization called the Urban Life Center in Chicago. And basically my parents dropped me off in a part of Chicago that, if, as a parent myself, I would have been reluctant to drop my kid off at. We passed the Robert Taylor homes, which are no longer there, and certainly were a pretty violent public housing project at the time. But it dropped me off at this place. We were housed at a single room occupancy, a separate location from drop off. It was in the uptown neighborhood of Chicago, North Side, and we were encouraged to, we had internships. I had an internship at University of Illinois in their psychiatry department, but the rest of our time was occupied by assignments to go to various places and learn different cultures and learn how to navigate a city. So taking the subway, the L, we were assigned to tour to go to like music venues in certain neighborhoods. One of the neighborhoods was Boys Town, in the North Halsted section of Chicago. And that was, I had found kind of the Emerald City, so to speak, a neighborhood where the norm was being gay, and, guys were holding hands, there were, normal bookstores for gay people. I mean, it was just, I didn't seek the program because I thought I'd find that. I just happened to choose that class and realize there was a whole life out there beyond beyond career. And shortly after that class, somewhere in relation to that class, I had a pretty serious motor vehicle accident on the way to work. And that, combined with seeing what was in Chicago, made me realize, life's short and about more than just becoming a doctor and my occupation. And so that was definitely a huge stepping stone.
So when you returned to Manchester College, then how did you feel? Were you feeling more liberated, perhaps, about your identity?
I was, and I was. It was so I really, senior year at Manchester is when I probably really just took off. When I set my mind to something, I'm kind of an all or none person. So if it's going to happen, I'm full steam ahead. So I decided, after the experience in Chicago, kind of nearly, kind of facing a potential death in a car accident, even though I wasn't even seriously injured. It all made me wake up, and I thought, I've got to do more than what I've been doing. And kind of backing up to high school, one of my epiphany moments at the end of high school, it was junior or senior year, I was in study hall reading a newspaper, and I read an article about Dolly Parton and her new movie at the time, 1992, Straight Talk. And I went to the movie and read more about her, and I just thought, here's a lady who doesn't hide who she is and seems, it's kind of the high school would cringe if I said this, but I kind of found God in Dolly Parton's approach to people much more so than I did in their Christian high school. And so one of the phrases, it's a movie about it. She's a talk radio host in Chicago, ironically. One of the phrases she uses to tell people to kind of take control of their lives is honk your own horn. So my senior year of college, I decided to honk my own horn and sought out places where I could explore my identity more. And I, of all things, this certainly dates me, but I looked in the phone book in the yellow pages for my hometown under gay and found a community center called Up the Stairs Community Center, and went to a few programs there. And that's actually where I met my spouse, John. It was an incredible place. I went to a few programs, and a man who's very key to John and my life, Dave, was there, and he knew John. He saw me, and he felt like John and I might be a good connection. So he invited John to a Friday night program that I was going to be at, and John and I met. They had a reading room library in this community center, and we connected over an Advocate magazine that had Cher on the cover. We were both looking at it, reviewing it, and John invited me later to his home for a Sunday lunch, and it's pretty amazing. We've been together ever since. That was 97.
Uh-huh. And a student at Manchester.
John was a teacher. We have an age gap, and John was actually an elementary school teacher in Huntington, Indiana. And I was still a senior at Manchester, but on my path to med school at Indiana University School of Medicine. And it's kind of odd that we thought that could work at all, but it just did. We had a connection, and he kept teaching. We realized after months that this was going to work for us, and I helped him find a house in Fort Wayne, and he kept his job in the small town but lived in Fort Wayne. And I was able to do first 2 years the classroom part of medical school in Fort Wayne and the clinical years in Indianapolis. So I had an apartment in the first year of med school, wanted to be independent for a year. And then John and I moved in together after that. And he was really the reason I came out to my family. Even though I realized as I was at Manchester that I was gay, I didn't have a reason to kind of rock the boat with family. And I knew it would probably upset them. Not that they wouldn't accept me, but it would be a whole aspect of my life they didn't know. And I didn't want to hurt them. It also would probably be a form of grieving, on their part. They probably had a vision of me becoming a parent, which at the time I met John didn't even fathom becoming a parent, having kids in the traditional family. And I just didn't want to hurt them or ruin their dreams for me. But when I met John, I had a reason. And that summer after John and I met, we met in February, I wrote a letter. I've always been better in writing than I am verbally communicating. And I wrote a probably, I imagine it was 4 or 5 pages letter to my parents and extended family, siblings, left it at the house. John and I went to a park in downtown Fort Wayne, knowing they would read it. And then we went back, and they were open arms. They were grieving, they were sad that they had missed out on a huge part of my life, but no rejection. And extended family, same way. Some of the extended family said they knew it all along, which, in hindsight, I asked mom to take me to Bette Midler concerts in high school. These are all of my CDs were Bette Midler, Dolly Parton. These are probably, and I dressed well. You probably, they could have figured it out, but anyway, it went well. And John was the reason I came out to them.
What about John's family? How did that go?
Sure. He had been out to his family already, and they had pretty much put it out of their minds. As long as he didn't have a relationship, they were okay with it. Sort of like some churches approach. It's there as long as you don't practice it. And so, John introduced that I existed to his parents, and it didn't go well initially. There were, I'd say I may have the time frame off, but for a year or two, they didn't even want to meet me. John and I were persistent, so we didn't want to sever his relationship with them. We gave them an opportunity to change. And I remember several Christmas Eves where we would drive out to his family's home in a small town in Indiana, and on the hope that they would invite me in for their gathering. And John would go to the door. I would stay in the car. They wouldn't invite me in. So John would make his time short. I'd be in the car. We had a little dog named Eunice, a miniature schnauzer then. She'd be with me. And, we persisted. I wasn't going to disappear and let them ignore me, nor was John going to let them do that. And really within a few years, they came around, and we formed an amazing relationship. I really respect folks who are able to change. My family was wonderful from the start, but I've got to say it takes a lot to start from a place of not accepting and growing over years to accept. And so I give them a ton of credit. And both his parents have died. His mom died earlier this year, and just love them both so much. And it worked out, just was a lot harder.
Yeah. Were you and John in a committed relationship? Were you married? Had you done a ceremony? What was that like?
Sure. So our first summer, which was summer before I started med school, we decided to take a big road trip. We rented a car and drove to Santa Fe. John loved the Southwest, so he chose the destination. And we actually drove this car. It was a Chevy Cavalier, went off-roading, if you can imagine, in a Chevy Cavalier into Georgia O'Keeffe country, and climbed up on one of the big, I guess you could call it a rock, not really a mountain, but and we exchanged vows and rings with each other. Nobody else around, just nature and the expanse. And it was not legal, of course. Gay marriage was not legal then. We eventually married in 2000. So that was 97. In 2008, we happened to have booked a trip to San Francisco for vacation. And that was the week that California allowed gay marriage, and so we were at the San Francisco courthouse in line, first or second day they were doing that, and legally married there. And then
Hmm.
afterwards, John had arranged a ceremony. He retired from teaching, and he became an Episcopal. Well, not really an Episcopal, an Order of Saint Francis uh, missionary brother. All of his work through the Episcopal Church, and he found Mission House in San Francisco, and the brothers there did a religious ceremony for us after the courthouse ceremony, and it was beautiful, just the two of us.
And you adopted a son at a certain point.
We did. So, I worked as a primary care doc in Fort Wayne for about 10 years, and John continued his teaching as an elementary school, various grades. And eventually we decided I was going to go back, do a fellowship, and become a palliative care doc because that was the work I was really drawn to. And we moved to North Carolina after I did my fellowship with Indiana University in Indianapolis because we were always drawn to the mountains and we loved Asheville. And we I practiced palliative medicine here, and over time we realized we had achieved a wonderful relationship. Had great jobs, and John retired and started doing his mission work. We'd had a couple of wonderful dogs. We had loving extended families. So we felt like we had kind of done everything, and we decided we needed to do something beyond us. And one of our trips, we loved traveling, and I remember we had talked about it for a while intermittently, but we were sitting under the Eiffel Tower one night and on a vacation, and looking up at the tower. And for anybody who's seen that in person, it's just amazing how big it is. And we thought we've got to do something that's bigger than us. And we decided officially then, though we had pondered it before, to move forward with becoming foster parents. And we fostered our son Josh. In 2017, I think, is when he was our foster son, and then we adopted him. He had to foster for a year in 2018, and he's 21 years old now. Has moved out of the house and is on his own. But yeah, we became parents, which back in '97 when we met was not even on the horizon.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about your medical work. You mentioned you focused on palliative care. Can you just give a brief description of what that is?
Sure. And I printed off, I'll look at my notes here because there's an organization called Center to Advance Palliative Care. And that is, it's a good place for people to go if they want to know more about it. You can go there as a layperson and see what palliative care is all about. American Academy of Hospice and Palliative Medicine is another site. But the technical definition CAPC, Center to Advance Palliative Care, likes us to use is that palliative care is specialized medical care for people living with serious illness. This type of care is focused on providing relief from the symptoms and stress of the illness. The goal is to improve quality of life for the patient and family. Now, putting that in the words of going back to the Straight Talk movie and Dolly Parton, her character, Dr. Shirley, the way that would be conveyed is basically palliative care focuses on the patient and patient's family, whatever that definition is for the patient, rather than on the illness. So we see folks who are very sick, whether it's cancer, heart failure, dementia, strokes, there's trauma, just about anything you can imagine. And we help them understand their condition, talk with them about their different paths of care they can take, the path of aggressive treatment, or if it's applicable, a path of comfort and hospice care. And more importantly, then we listen to them. We listen to their story, try to understand what matters to them, and help line up the path they take with what really matters to them. So that, and a lot of, we also help manage difficult symptoms, pain, shortness of breath, nausea, but also existential issues as
Mhm.
well.
We're The time is just flying. We have about 4 or 5 minutes left. Are there maybe an example or two of a story that you've heard from one of your patients that has helped you in guiding their care?
Sure, sure. So going back, when I worked in Indianapolis at Indiana University, I had a social worker, Helen, just one of the many angels in my life. She taught me so much. She and I worked with a patient, and I'll call her Joyce for now. And she was a woman. I think she was about 90. She was in the hospital with pulmonary fibrosis, so stiffening of her lungs on huge high flow oxygen, very short of breath, even with talking. She had this pulmonary fibrosis from radiation done to treat breast cancer years before, and she was struggling because she really didn't want to keep doing all of the treatments in the hospital. She knew she was going to die in the hospital if she continued what we were doing, which is back and forth whenever her oxygen levels dropped. Her daughter was not ready to accept that she was close to dying. And um, Helen and I helped her and her daughter process all of this. And I remember in particular, Joyce was all about singing. She loved spirituals. She had grown up picking cotton in the South, working in a nursing home kitchen. She had worked hard to send her daughter to school in Savannah so her daughter could move ahead of her socioeconomically. Um, and one of her favorite songs when she would work was singing One Day at a Time. And, this Joyce would sing this to Helen and me despite her severe lung disease. And we ultimately worked with her and her daughter, got her home with the hospice team, and the hospice team followed up with us. And the hospice nurse said for several days after she was home, she lived less than a week, she would sing that song once a day. And the hospice nurse said the last time she sang it, she couldn't finish the words due to her trouble breathing. And the hospice nurse finished it for her. And so, we listened to Joyce and realized her goal, what mattered to her, was being at home when she passed, not in a place so unfamiliar like a hospital. And so that's often what we do. We work with plenty of folks who pursue aggressive care as well. I did a lot of work with heart failure patients when I worked in Asheville who lived for years, pursued aggressive therapies, heart pumps, all kinds of interventions. But she's a good example of figuring out what matters to a person and helping the patient and family do what lines up with what matters.
I would imagine that patients are comforted when they know that you are hearing what they have on their mind and what they want and how they feel. So listening to their stories is sounds like a vital of your practice.
It is. And as I prepared for this, I thought, gosh, now I'm in the role of doing doing what I ask my patients to do, which is talk about themselves, and it's not easy. Um, but there's a line, and I think we probably have a minute or two for me to share it. A musical artist I love, Brandy Carlisle. She has a song called "The Story" that I believe actually one of her bandmates wrote. And the line, again, I'll look at my notes here to get it right. The song is called "The Story," and the lyrics that I like that highlight what we do in palliative care and also what John and others have done for me is all of the lines across my face tell you the story of who I am. So many stories of where I've been and how I got to where I am. But these stories don't mean anything when you've got no one to tell them to. It's true. I was made for you. And I certainly feel John and I are made for each other, and I realize that's a tool we bring to our patients and their families. And I think it's just as important as a heart cath, an appendix surgery, cancer surgery. It's often forgotten in traditional medicine, but our team, our palliative care teams, are there to bring that power to medicine.
Well, as conclude, I would observe that it seems to me that you've come to a really good place in your own life, and that you have.
Are you still there? I think I lost you, Greg. Oh.
Hello. Well, too bad Greg kind of timed out right in that moment. But Jeffrey, it really has been such an honor and delight to listen to your story. I am so touched and moved by the component of storytelling into healing, into a healing practice, into our life's journey. And I really loved the Dolly Parton thread that went through your story. And I appreciate the bravery that it took to share with us today. I'm sure that you will inspire many others. And as we get ready to go, I'm just wondering if you have a word or two of inspiration that you would share with others.
Um, Gosh, that's a tough one on the spot. I think the word or two of inspiration or instruction I have is just to listen to each other. John and I think we're strongest when we're doing work together, volunteering, and as Greg and I know each other through a food pantry in Fletcher, and so much of that work is listening to, we call them neighbors, the folks who are coming through the pantry, just listening to their story. And I get so much more out of that than I give. John and I worked in some relief for the fires in Gatlinburg. I think it was 2016, and just listening to people's stories as we took them through to get things they needed to continue living, I think was so powerful. When someone just has an ear, that's key. And, it breaks down our differences.
Well, there's no better time like the present moment to share those words of inspiration. And I deeply appreciate you sharing that with me. I know you've changed my day, and I'm sure you're touching many others with your bravery and sharing with us today. So I hear you, and we appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. If you have been inspired by this video, please just press share and help others to hear and receive and listen so that we can all be a part of a community that evolves together. And appreciate you, Jeff, and I appreciate you, Greg. Sorry that Greg timed out. And everyone with us today, we'll see you soon. Thank you so much. I'm going to end the live stream.
Thank you.